That was Millionaire by DJ Quad, and you're listening to Under Pressure FM. We've been chatting about music and the industry and how much it's changed in the past decade or so, and thought it would be interesting to do a little segment on it and get input from some listeners. It has changed so much so quickly, and it's had a massive effect on the entire world, really.
You got that right. It's almost terrifying how quickly technology has been evolving recently.
For
I feel like an
sure.
old fogey around technology. I'm like 21. It's ridiculous. They changed the YouTube layout on me again, and I'm really bitter about it.
It's pretty insane the impact that it's had on music in particular. I mean, let's think back to not even that far, just to the 90s or early 2000s.
An iconic time, honestly.
Iconic indeed. I'm sure we all remember rocking some flared jeans and bobbing along to a Discman.
Bobbing. I think we can all tell you were a cool kid.
Oh, the coolest of kids. Scucks, even.
Not... God, I don't miss the lingo at least.
I remember listening to music exclusively on a Discman, and this incredibly pink stereo my sister had. 6-year-old me wouldn't have even thought of listening to music on a computer, let alone an iPod.
Yeah, the fact that music has become totally digitized is pretty amazing, especially in such a short amount of time. I've probably only lived around like a quarter of my lifetime, and music has gone from being played on tapes to CDs to tiny little pocket-sized computers in that time. And we have a ridiculous amount of old technology still floating around now, intermingled with the digital music, like records and tapes and CDs. That's mental to wrap your head around, honestly.
Hey, do you remember when floppy disks were a thing?
Boy, do I. All the struggles of dial-up internet. Horrifying.
I remember getting my first iPod when I was about 10 or 11. I didn't even know how the scroll wheel worked. I never encountered something where you could just use touch. I was used to giant brick Nokia phones and having to press a button 4 times just to get an S. Although, those things did make a sort of purring sound when you got the good speed going though.
They were hard times indeed. Lest we forget the most groundbreaking game of our generation, Snake. I never was very good at that game.
I'm sure we'd get over it one day.
One day.
Not to mention the opportunities now for artists to share music without having to go and make a bunch of CDs. It's pretty cool if you think about it. How did we survive without it?
When you look at how much has changed just in the lifetime of someone who's lived for around a quarter of a century, just think about how insane it must be for some of our more mature audience members.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned before being 21 and finding it hard to keep up. Imagine having records and cassette tapes as being your main source of easy listening. Then suddenly CDs are a thing. Then, oh no, just kidding guys, digital music is where it's at, especially for someone who is musical or listens to a lot of music. It must have been a pretty drastic change over the years, even if it has been somewhat gradual.
I'd say so. It's really awesome that records are making a real comeback lately. I love the idea of buying vinyl, and I can especially understand those who used to listen to them regularly holding on to that way of listening to music, rather than just having a bunch of like music on a device. It's just the same,
For
you know?
sure. Well, both of us are only in our 20s, so can only really speculate about what it's been like to have technology change so much, especially over a longer period of time. But we did have a chat to Chris on the phone, who's both a musician himself and an avid music listener, about how the digitization of music has affected him.
So Chris, you told us you used to record music with your band back in the day. Tell me about it. When were you guys recording music?
Right, so that was in the 90s, mostly. Late 80s and in the early 90s when we recorded music. So initially we would go and pay someone to record in like a home studio, a 16-track tape, recording to tape typically, and that would cost quite a bit of money. We'd have to save up and spend quite a bit of money to do it. And then when we got a bit more interested in alternative music, then we borrowed 4-track recording equipment from friends and recorded our own music. That allowed us to do it all without having to spend any money. But in both cases, the end product was a cassette tape, and most people still, would use cassette tapes to listen to music. Limitations of them were that they'd wear out and they'd stretch. So that kind of thing. If you're listening to them, something with batteries in it, it would go slow. So when CDs came out a bit later, and software like Pro Tools, so one of the people we knew had access to Pro Tools at work, so that meant we could master what we'd recorded digitally, and then we could make CD copies of it.
What about after CDs? Did you guys ever record music digitally?
Yep, so GarageBand came along with having access to Macs. GarageBand came as software on them, and so that meant we could, you can record directly 1 track at a time, typically plug in the microphone, plug in the guitar, and with effects on board and all kinds of things, so you could easily make demos just by yourself or with other people, and the sophistication of what you could do with it was far more than what you could do with like a 4-track or something, but also really you could achieve results which were pretty much at least as good as what we had to pay someone for in a small studio.
So would you say that digital music means that music is easier to distribute, or?
I think it's easier to distribute probably because we used to make copies of our tapes and make photocopy covers and that sort of stuff, and make something to give to people when you're trying to organise gigs, places to play. You take your demos around and then you'd sell your demos when you played somewhere, so that was sort of a typical thing to do. You'd have a pile of your tapes in the corner and you'd say, you can buy a tape for $5. And so you sort of spread your music around like that, but now digitally it's a lot easier because you can send a song to someone on an email even. Or you can have, CDs, which are even cheaper and more reliable than tapes, that you could sell physically or hand out. And I think the whole thing still goes about the marketing is the hard part. How do you get your name out there? But in terms of like a format, it's a lot easier.
Awesome, that's all the questions we have time for, but thanks for chatting to us today.
Cool, thanks for your insight, Chris.
We'll be right back with more on iTunes and the music industry.
I think we can all agree that music digitization has affected us all in how we listen to and share music.
Yeah, of course, but we have to be a lot more careful nowadays when we share music, especially over the internet and radio.
Ah yes, we pay a lot of money to stay out of trouble.
That's for damn sure. Do you remember back in 2003 when the RIAA went on their little suing spree for sharing copyrighted music?
Well, I wouldn't really call it little. They sued close to 300 people in a single month.
That many, huh? It clearly didn't go down too well, even with the public awareness of the lawsuits.
Yeah, the public wasn't too happy with how they went about that. Out of millions of people illegally sharing music, 30,000 were randomly selected. Even our grandparents weren't safe.
Jeez, that doesn't sound too fair. How did they not lose track of them all?
Well, I think they did. They announced they wanted to stop all their lawsuits by 2008, and after that they decided to go after our internet service providers, introducing a 3-strike system for file sharing. You were supposedly going to be allowed 2 warnings, and then they'd cut your internet service after the 3rd.
Boy, am I glad they didn't actually go through with that. I'm sure we'd all be living back in the Stone Age with no internet.
We'd have to print out all our memes and send them in the mail. Without a doubt, I think we all remember Bluetoothing some banging tunes to each other back in high school with our flip phones.
Don't even bring up the cringiness of high school. I know my grades weren't too flashy.
They can't have been too bad. Well, they've eased up a bit on copyright after the Fair Use Act was introduced.
When we talk about the good old days, we tend to relate music to jamming with your buds to an album you'd waited patiently in line to acquire, only to really want to listen to that one song on the album over and over because you heard it on the radio the other day.
Exactly. I remember going out to get the album Dookie from Green Day simply because I liked the song When I Come Around. Good album, that one.
Yeah, there's some really good songs on there, eh?
For sure. However, you had this whole experience of going out and getting this album. When iTunes came along, there was no need to go out to your local music store anymore and physically pick up the copy. It was quick, simple, and way cheaper, causing a lot of controversy in the music industry.
Really? I thought they benefited from it, from all these posts talking about how many sales they've had on singles alone.
Yeah, they do hype it up a bit, and they do make a lot of sales, but not as much as they used to. When iTunes started, they sold individual songs for 99 cents each, which was incredible for us as a consumer, but not for the industry. Because of its easy way to acquire music, these lovely community stores for music closed.
I guess it is true, isn't it? I mean, there's the odd store in the warehouse where you can still get CDs if you want to, but not many people tend to choose these options anymore, do they?
No, they don't, especially seen as iTunes appears to have a cheaper option for consumers.
Does this mean that the music industry may not actually be doing as well as they were?
Well, according to statistics, music sales reached their peak in 2000. Specifically, Americans bought 943 million CD albums, and digital sales weren't even a blip on the radar. By 2007, however, those inexpensive digital singles overtook CDs by a wide margin, generating 819 million sales to just 500 million for
Whoa,
CD.
still a fairly large number, but that is a very large drop. If it was like that just for Americans, globally it'd be pretty similar, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Artists in the coming future are going to have to rely on various merchandise, tour sales, and endorsement deals to make up what's lost in album sales.
That'll make the fans happy, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, more opportunities for them to support their favourite artists. Though isn't it sad how the experience of going out and getting your hands on a physical copy of a CD has been somewhat lost to the ease that is iTunes' digital music selection. It's great for the consumer, yet maybe not so good for the industry. It's definitely worth a thought or two. I wonder what will happen in the future.
Yeah, I guess in a way Spotify is taking over iTunes with their whole free music streaming gig. Our audience seems to agree too. We've got a text here from Bob who says, I only use iTunes when I had an iPod, however I use Spotify a lot. I can use it on my phone. This allows me to listen to what I want, where I want, when I want. The world of CDs is dead.
Well, Apple does offer Apple Music, which is a streaming service, but I don't think we should get into that.
Yeah, it's about time we let listeners enjoy some sweet tunage. Let's play a classic, shall we?
Good idea. You're listening to Under Pressure FM. If you're just tuning in, we've been chatting about iTunes and digitization of music and how it's had a huge effect on the music industry. Let's cast our minds back to good old 2003, the year the fifth Harry Potter book was released. Arnold Schwarzenegger was elected governor of California, and in regards to today's show, the Apple iTunes Store was launched to the world, more specifically on the 23rd of April.
Wow, was it really that long ago?
Makes you feel your age, doesn't it? That's not all though. It originally released with a whopping 200,000 songs, but get this, as of 2017, the number of songs available to download is 26 million.
26 million? That's crazy.
I'll say. A bit of context for those of you unaware of the whole music scene back in the early 2000s. CDs were a big deal.
Oh, no kidding. I still find myself breaking out the old Discman when I'm feeling nostalgic, but start talking numbers, just
Well,
how
in the year
big were
2000
CDs?
alone, over 900,000 CDs were sold around the world. It's pretty crazy to imagine now, but that's almost 1 billion CDs in 1 year.
For the sake of conversation, I had a look into the amount of CDs sold in 2005. What's that, nearly 3 years after iTunes launched?
Yeah, that sounds about right. What were they?
Are you ready for this? 705,000.
Oh, come on. With all that build-up, I was expecting something like 100,000
Well,
or
let's not
50,000.
ignore facts here. Because of the popularity of the iTunes service, CD sales took a massive hit just based on the introduction of the digital platform. Like, that's all it took.
I mean, I guess when you put it like that.
Exactly. And like you were saying before, digital music has become such a common thing today, it's pretty easy to forget just how big CDs were before the invention of digital music and iTunes in general.
People were clearly quick to adopt the iTunes Store, though. I've got another little fact here for you. On its first week on the market, the store sold over 1 million songs to consumers. Remember before when I said it launched with 200,000 songs?
Yeah.
Well, 100,000 of those songs were downloaded at least once by everyone who used it.
That's incredible. I remember my parents picking up their third generation iPods that same week just to listen to all the music digitally.
Well, they weren't the only ones. Over 110,000 third generation iPods were ordered in the first week of iTunes' launch, so people were clearly keen to get on board with iTunes, even from launch. When the late Steve Jobs was in charge, he commented on iTunes' success. In less than 1 week, we've broken every record and become the largest online music company in the world.
Quite the statement, but yeah, I guess when you look at it, he was right.
It would seem that not everyone is so keen on iTunes, though. At least not these days. We have a text from Sally, which is rather blunt. That simply reads, iTunes is annoying as hell. Touche, Sally. Finn is brave, though, and admits, I illegally download my music anyway. Praise MP3 juices. Totally can't relate.
No, me neither. Another text says, never used iTunes because Dad has always been an Apple snob, but things like Google Play I have only just started using because it became the easiest way to listen to music on the go. And another listener says, I never used iTunes, I use a Russian site to get music.
That's a new one. But I mean, they've got a point. There's always been sites like Napster and LimeWire, the latter of which actually came out before iTunes, where users could download music and use peer-to-peer sharing. iTunes essentially monopolized the game.
Never did like Monopoly.
Terrible game. From iTunes has spawned tons of different ways to download, share, sell, or just listen to music digitally. First came Bandcamp in 2007, then arguably the most popular streaming service to date, Spotify and SoundCloud, which launched in October 2008.
It says here that Spotify had only 1 million registered users by March 2011, but now have a whopping unbelievable 175 million listeners as of 2016.
Wow. Imagine like 175 million Skittles in one room, and people take up a lot more room than Skittles.
This is true. SoundCloud has even more Skittles too, and by Skittles I mean listeners.
Naturally. But when you think about it, as Chris mentioned earlier, not having to produce physical demos, whether in the form of tapes or CDs, and the fact that anyone can share their music digitally for free even on YouTube, which has been around since 2005, might not mean that it's any easier to actually market your music or get your head above the crowd. It certainly is easier to get your music out there.
Totally. And while it might mean also that music is easier to steal and or illegally download, there are systems in place, for example YouTube's copyright system, as well as organisations like RIAA, which do protect artists' music.
Can't imagine going back to a time when the only way to access music was via tapes or the radio.
I think it's fair to say that the music industry has evolved an awful lot since the 80s, and it has a lot to do with the digitalisation of music.
And on that note, here's some more music.